Okay, let's make sure everything is up and running. Hello, hello. You ready to see? Everything is completely cool. Oh boy, oh man, oh boy, oh man. I'll turn that in later. I am super hype. This was my challenge for 2021. And on December 12th, 12/12/21, this is the end. Let's get it. Let's get it. Let's get it. Oh, hello, sexy. Oh, hello again. Oh man, I am super hype. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. The ultimate fan. There's my achievement. Stampers forever. Wow. Wow. And the weekly quest. Woohoo! Got an achievement in a Game Pass game. Wow. And now there's only 5 more achievements. And that is to look at all the features that is unlocked. So now let's do that. Your ticket has been upgraded. Look at that, ultimate fan. Woohoo. From Banjo, Viva Pinata, Conker's Bad Fur Day, Saberman, Jet Force Gemini, Perfect Dark, and oh, I'm forgetting Elements, Cameo, and many more. This has been fun and a pain to beat all these. I'm looking at you. One of the worst games in this collection. Actually, it might be the worst. Well, no. This one sucks even worse, I think. They're kind of tied up there. Everything else, mwah. This game I never even heard of. It is excellent. You know, fighting game, really good. Battletoads, loved playing that with the brothers. 100%ing this was a pain. Digger T-Rock, hard game, but only hard when it comes to the challenges in Rare Replay. It was easy to beat. Same thing with Solar Jetman, Snake Bridle Roll, the final boss. Oh my lordy. I almost broke my controller mashing that attack button. Cobra Triangle was a good game. RC Pro-Am, fun. Just like Slalom, fun. Gunfight, I don't know. I didn't mind the game, but it also wasn't too much fun. Completing Saberwolf, Underworld, and Night Lore. These are games I've never heard of, and they were completely different from games I'm used to, so it was nice to play a trilogy. ATAC 8? What is it? Yeah, ATAC. Game, again, I never heard of. Fairly fun. And then Jetpack and Jetman. Yeah, you guys suck. These games were pretty hard. Alright. Now let's go look at the snapshots just to show you I completed them all. Here's the playlist completed. This one. Holy jeezy. This one sucked. I literally got all the way to this one. And I was like, dang, these are all easy. This is pretty nice. And then you're so mean. Alright, then let's look at the other snapshots. This should give me a full list of every game. Yep, 5 out of 5. With every single game. You are one of my crowning achievements, but beating this entire collection just adds to it. And now, let's enjoy. I'm just gonna go down the list. I've only accidentally clicked on this one. The rest I have not even looked at, because I did not want to see a damn thing until I beat it. Let's go with some featurettes. Chill out and watch some stuff, I guess. Video 1 and video 2. Oh, that's it? Okay. What makes a rare game? Limited copies, a hidden gem.
When people ask what makes a rare game or how you can recognize a rare game, I think you could do the cheap option, go, oh, it's the googly eyes.
Eyes on absolutely everything.
Big googly eyes.
Big googly eyes on everything.
But
Yep.
I don't think you can actually spot a rare game.
That's a hard one to answer. Because all the rare games are sort of different.
We don't settle into a groove. We always are trying to find something new and exciting to create. And that's not just for the players, because we
They
as
have
developers like doing
generations that are
things
different.
as well. It's a two-way street, but it works.
The 90s games
really
are
well.
the same, and the 2000s games are the same.
What makes a rare game? Innuendo, British humour.
We very rarely did a game that was completely po-faced and straight-laced. We've always tried to make it so that it's going to entertain, because that's what we're in the business to do.
Exactly.
Entertain.
Games are supposed to be
And
fun.
there's lots of ways to do that. But, you know, we like having a laugh, and we like everybody else that plays our games to have a laugh.
You've got to come in and have fun every day, right? If you come in and start wearing suits and just acting a bit dry and just worrying about the numbers or worrying about this, then you're not going to create a fun experience.
Everybody has fun. I don't think that you can make fun without having fun, and I think that shows when you play the games.
Ultimately, I think that the core of what makes a rare game is the amount of love and care and attention to detail that the people at Rare
That is
give.
true. There's always
we're
something
complete
hidden in
perfectionists.
every single game.
I don't think I've ever seen anyone quite obsess about a small bush that as a big tall tree or as a main character than we do.
Going that extra mile, it was something that everybody picked up off Tim and Chris. Like they were really convinced that going the extra mile and putting things in games that players don't expect was what would make their title stand out, and I think everybody kind of took the lead from that.
The Rare logo was one of the first logos that I actually even recognised, like as a gamer, when I was sort of 12, 13.
Everyone remembers the feeling when that Rare logo just spins onto the screen.
I remember feeling like if you saw that logo on the box and at the start of the game when that logo would come up, you knew no matter what game it was going to be your next favourite game.
Everything would come together to create this sort of intangible magic that you can't really...
That is true.
Can't really put your finger on.
There's only
it is
2 or 3
literally a rare
games I really
quality.
did not like
Nothing
in this
felt like a rare
entire
game.
collection.
It was just special. I don't know why. It just was.
That sounds awful, but you know what I mean. It's true though.
Before I came here, I don't think I could have answered that question, because every game Rare made had a unique quality to it, had something magical about it, an X factor, if you like. And now that I am here, and I've been here a few years, I think what makes a Rare game is the people that work at Rare and the culture of this place.
We've got so many people that live, eat, sleep and breathe video games. They've all got the same view. They all want a great game, they all love it, and they all want to play it.
Even if it meant that you had to spend almost your entire life at work,
It was that end result that you were trying to achieve. You know, you were trying to bring out the next rare game.
I myself, I'm a bit of obsessive and put a lot of hours into this job. And I believe that, I think it shows in the product that if you love the project and you're kind of like really passionate about it, you'll put a bit of your soul into it. And I think it sometimes comes at a cost, but it's always a worthwhile cost.
I'm a firm believer that the games that come out of Rare are a reflection of the people that work on them at the time. They've all got this certain something, but they've all got their own identity, and that came from the teams.
The team has the ownership.
It is true. It does feel like everybody throws their own thing into it.
To do what they want and to make the game that they want to make.
Diversity
Whatever
and
ideas they come up with, we're like, yeah, let's try it out. Let's throw it in the prototype. Let's see if it works. You know, we don't want to be restrictive. We don't want to be telling them what they have to do. It has to be the team that's creating this game, right?
And so the kind of the humour, the way they looked at life, the way they basically did everything would be reflective in the games, but it was all being held together by this kind of shared Rare ethos of, if you're going to do a job, make sure you do it properly.
Awesome. It is really nice to see developers talk about the games that they spend years on, because you can really tell how passionate everybody is. You're not in the video game industry if you do not like video games, you know? Voice acting. They've never done too much voice acting. Okay, I mean dialogue. There's plenty of sounds and... yeah.
Supreme victory!
Yeah! Look at that ultra combo.
Lottie doesn't want you to know this, but you
there's 100 hours of my life.
Congratulations! You've got a unicorn! It's so condescending!
Oh man. Alright, I'll give it to him. They pretty much had one guy do most of the voices. Perfect Dark.
This doesn't seem normal. No one's around.
Perfect Dark was an amazing game I never knew about.
No spent ammo cases or bullet holes.
But there ought to be a rear guard at least. It makes no sense.
Joanna, it's good to see you. Come with me. I'll walk you around the training rooms.
You want a criminal record? I can do that. Bug off or I'll trash your security clearance.
Joanna Dark.
Going somewhere?
Something I can do for you, old woman.
Return our sapient immediately. You don't know what you're doing.
Yes, I do. I'm leaving.
One more chance. Give it back. And you could come and work for me. Sorry, gotta shoot.
Grabbed by the Ghoulies. Another awesome game. But screw that boss fight. Oh my lord. That was 4 hours. Just in the boss fight. the little Jinjo nymphs.
Oh, ah, no.
A diddly-doo. Oh. Oh. A diddly-doo. Oh.
Conquer.
Well, there I am. Conquer the king. King of all the land. Who'd have thought that?
Well, you see, the thing with my voice is it's not actually what you hear in the game. Because thanks to Mr. Robin Beanland, Esquire, he does some finickety flunky stuff with my voice to make it sound higher than it is at the moment. So you're getting the inflection, but not necessarily the pitch. I thank you.
Barry.
Hi, you've reached like Barry's place?
I'm not available to answer the phone, obviously. However,
If you leave like your name and number,
they sound cute. I may ring you back. Ciao.
So everything's pitched up.
Okay. What's your name?
Just because they're rodents.
Beardy. You haven't got a beard.
No. Ready. I scare badges.
Ah, what do it goes Ting? It goes Ting. And Ting is what it goes, and that's it. I go bye-bye now.
The great mighty Pooh.
Squirrel, look what you've done. I'm flushing. I'm flushing. Oh, what a world, what a world. Who'd have thought a good little squirrel like you could have destroyed my beautiful clagginess? Oh, I'm going.
Ding, 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 ding.
Cooey, only me. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. It's Mr. Pants.
Oh, we don't see Mr. Pants very often. Okay, those were the featurettes. Now let's do the making of, which this is what I really love. Hell yeah, 7 videos. My very first making of video I watched was for Ratchet & Clank, and I can literally say that is what helped make a dream of me making video games. Just seeing them all talk and be so passionate about their project and having so much fun, like that, a real dream right there.
After we'd done two kind of platform games, we were kind of looking for the next opportunities.
One part of the team went on to build DKC3, and the other one went on to create a new IP called Project
Dream, which at the time was on the Super NES.
Yep,
We're all massive fans of Zelda, so we thought let's do our take on an adventure game.
When I joined Dream, we just started to move it to N64. It had previously been started on SNES, but we were looking to move it onto this new machine.
We had a character on the screen. It looked very nice, but this was like really at the end of the Super NES's life.
We had Edson, which was the hero of the game, and we had Dinger, which was his kind of pet dog that he finds.
And he'd say, "Oh, dog, I can see a dog down there. I'd better go and see if he's all right." You'd go down, you'd get the dog, and then you'd be chased by trolls. And we worked on that for quite a number of months.
This kind of boy who kind of grew up in a village, and he went out into the big wide world where he gets embroiled in this kind of fantastic adventure. And the main bad guys are a bunch of pirates led by Captain Black Eye.
Captain Black.
The view you had was kind of a bit like a game called Pandemonium or Nights into Dreams.
I think the scope of the thing was so large, we couldn't see any end in sight.
Greg and Tim had been talking, and they decided to change the whole styling of the game, and it became something akin to Super Mario 64.
We'd changed the main character from the boy, who we felt was a bit weak, and we felt we wanted something with a bit more character. So we investigated firstly a rabbit, and then secondly a bear.
Get rid of this guy. Let's get an animal in there. Bear. We're having a bear. That was it.
It went from being Dream to being Kazoo, but again, it was jumping on things and lots of kind of baddies and different things you could be doing.
And it's all going to be instruments: banjo, piccolo, all of those. Like, yes, I'll just do it right now.
So we had kind of banjo in this kind of big, sprawling adventure game that we weren't quite sure how we were ever going to finish. So we decided to can Dream at that point, and focus on something we felt a lot more confident we could kind of build.
And I remember talking with Chris Stamper in the canteen once, and he asking me what I thought of banjo. And I still think I was a little bit annoyed that the rabbit had been dumped.
We took banjo from Project Dream and kind of put him in his own game, and we wanted it to be a platformer.
Should have been a rabbit. It would have been Bunny Kazooie or something.
Bunny Kazooie? No, Banjo Kazooie's just
The roaming
fun.
world of Banjo, we encountered a whole new set of problems because we were working in 3D now, and we had things like a camera that we had to keep control of and work out where it was going to go and what's going to happen when the player goes behind a wall.
So we started developing like a moveset for
camera
banjo.
is one of the hardest
And
things.
I wanted to give him a double jump, having kind of seen Mario's double jump, but I wanted it to be more flexible so the player could double jump anywhere they like.
We were up against Mario. I wanted to try and beat Mario, and that was our thing. Try to do that.
Now, what would explain away the fact that this fat bear can jump in midair? So I think we pondered a few ideas, and when we're getting desperate, and usually when you get desperate, all the crazy ideas come out. And one idea we had was a pair of wings could appear out of this backpack.
All these sort of things that we just encounter as we started developing, and we kind of just tackled them as we encountered them.
So this pair of wings kind of came out of the backpack and flapped, and it explained it away, and it fitted perfectly.
We started testing out proper sort of 3D levels, and we got the character jumping around and swimming and things, and it then went from Kazoo to Banjo Kazoo.
Well, let's have a pair of legs that appear out the backpack to kind of assist Banjo, so it's not him running, it's these legs.
So we then added EI on the end, or IE rather, and it became Banjo Kazooie, and then we just made that.
These wings and these legs could belong to another character, and this character lives in Banjo's backpack and comes out at occasions.
So Kazooie was just an afterthought.
That was where Kazooie was born.
He already had the backpack and everything. It
was probably the breakthrough moment, and then all the dialogue, the interjection between them, and Kazooie being sarcastic and adventurous, and Banjo being like kind of a bit dim-witted and slow. All of that came afterwards, and it was all literally just built on this wanting a double jump.
We needed like a shaman character, and then it was really just down. We were just left to do, get on with it. So Mumbo quickly took shape with his skull and his feathers and his furry pants, and in those days you could literally draw the character, get someone to approve it, model it, animate it, and have it in the game. It was 2 or 3 days.
So Banjo and Kazooie never speak, but initially they did. I think one of the reasons we made them have that strange garbled noise. We realised that we were going to have to record so much speech, it was going to increase development time considerably.
I did the voice of Mumbo, of course, Ikum Bokum.
The voices for all the characters were just kind of different. A lot of them were Grant, but a lot of them were different people just kind of mumbling sort of different little phrases.
The Ikum Bokum, I just played with it, it sounded good. So Ikum Bokum is made up of come and have a go if you think you're hard enough. So like I went got what I bought big got eat up like that, and I recorded myself doing that, and then I cut it up into pieces.
When we'd been working on Dream, I'd been doing some of the voices for the boy, and then when he changed to the bear, Tim was looking for a noise. There are noises that he would make and words that he would say. So I did some of the voices for Banjo then, and then it transformed into the gargled noise at the end. So the Kazooie needed a special noise as well, and it needed to be separate from Banjo. It needed to be noticeably different. So we made her much sharper noise because she was a Breagull. So that was why she was Bree. Stop and Swap, that came about because we discovered by accident that if you pull out the cartridge on the N64, put in another cartridge, the contents of the memory, the RAM, are still there. So we realised that we could use this to make a transfer of some information from one game into another.
The idea was to either reward players for playing rare games, so it's like the more you play, the more you get rewarded, or
I did not know Stop and Swap was on the original
So you have to actually quickly grab the cartridge, grab it, and then put the other one in. And I think we were concerned that people were going to do damage to their cartridges.
Unfortunately, we didn't tell Nintendo because we didn't think they'd really need to know until towards the end. And then, of course, when we did tell them, they said that's not really going to work, and it's not guaranteed to work in all cases for the N64. So as a result, we had to drop the feature, but the remnants of that still exist in both games.
Oh, okay. So that's why it was easy to...
The game, I think, was well received. Again, another massive thing for me was to see Banjo at the top of the all formats charts in the UK.
Yes, I think players appreciated the humour and the charm and the characters we managed to put into the world.
When I see my son play Banjo-Kazooie, it's really heartwarming because it just feels right?
It felt like almost every character you came across had a story to tell. Most of them were sob stories that you had to help out, so it's almost like Banjo was like an agony aunt going around fixing all these problems. So,
like running around in Banjo was fun without doing anything. It was just fun to run around, you know.
I think they loved it, didn't they? What are you saying?
That is true. Banjo-Kazooie and Tooie, it was just fun to run around. It was fun to 100%
I think it's just the whole immersive nature of the world, the fantastic music.
Now the third one, nuts and bolts, not so much.
The charm of it was
I was
what
getting a
elevated
little
it from
ticked off.
maybe just another 3D platform into something that kind of people remember.
Awesome. Alright. Ooh, Battletoads, hell yeah.
Battletoads is a beat-em-up game. Battletoads is a platform beat-em-up game. A platform beat-em-up strategy racing. Battletoads is a game that we produced featuring 3 characters, which were toads, called Rash, Zitz and Pimple. We wanted a set of characters that we could produce huge merchandise for. I remember the Batman film had just hit the movies, and we were looking at all of the different merchandising that you could buy for the film and for the character, and we wanted something like that. The t-shirts, the plastic models, the bedspreads, everything.
At the time with Battletoads, I remember Tim being very impressed by the Ninja Turtles. So it was meant to be a sort of tongue-in-cheek version, or at least I thought it was meant to be a tongue-in-cheek version of the Turtles.
So it's kind of a typical example of Rare's looking at what was popular and then kind of putting our spin on it, kind of amping it up, making it a bit more edgy, a bit more kind of violent. We went through all kinds of ideas and names. I think I was going to call them the Amphibians at one time, but we ended up with Battletoads, and that worked.
Yes,
I wanted it to
very
look
much
kind of Disney-like, but I wasn't anywhere near a good enough artist for that. So we came up with a few different gimmicks, and we had the hands expanding and the foot turning into a huge boot. I think the ability to be able to transform limbs rather than carry actual weapons around, that's what made them unique. I think if you picked up the original NES version of Battletoads now, I think you get a bit of a shock, because it was a very precise, very difficult game to play. Back then they were kind of quite short games, so one way of getting more kind of playability was to provide the player with a decent level of challenge. Mark, who was leading the software effort, was like a really talented player.
Decent level of challenge, my
general
ass.
difficulty level around what he was good at. He made it so difficult. You had to be precise to the 100th of the second when to press the button on the controller.
Yep.
At the time, we were avid game players.
Oh
and it got to
boy,
the point where
could never beat it as a
I
kid.
could do the
Happy I'm
turbo
done
tunnel
with it.
without losing a life. We even tried to do the last section with the really fast walls with our eyes closed, and we got really close to finishing it, but no one could ever do it. The reviews were quite complimentary on kind of
nobody could
not
ever do
only
it,
how
and they still
challenging it
released the
was,
game.
I liked it, but I think the variety
That was
of the
only the
levels
third level.
was the key to how well it was received. Like on one level, it would be sideways scrolling doing one thing, the next level you'd be on a rope going down a thing, then you'd be on a tunnel, then you'd be on some kind of like weird device, then you'd be on the back of a snake. It like jumped around all over the place. It was such a breath of fresh air in terms of the breadth of gameplay in it.
In the arcade version of Battletoads, we were able to be even more over the top with the violence, the comedy violence, than the NES, because there was obviously certain restrictions on what we could produce for a console. So we went as pretty much extreme as we could be, and I think that
well, yeah, treated like Mortal Kombat.
Of the product.
It took a long time to produce because it was all a new kind of game for us, but it was a fun one to work with.
It was like building a car, and you start with no parts. You've got to just start manufacturing each of the parts and then putting them together.
Chris Stamper started working on a board. He actually made
me and the boys had so much fun playing the arcade version.
Meanwhile, we had to write all the software. Well, I had to write all the software from scratch. So all the audio drivers, all the audio software, all the graphics software. There'd be points where we'd tweak it and we'd say, oh, the hardware is not fast enough here. We need to make some changes. And then he'd add that in, and then we'd change the software again. So there was really quite a bit of collaboration.
Working on the arcade one was a great experience and taught me a lot about a very different type of design, which wasn't all about let's try and keep the player playing for hours.
Yeah, it's not just software at that point. Let's get the player on the machine, let's take some money off them, let's kill them off as quick as possible, but let's make sure they've had a good enough time so they want to put more money in.
At the end of Battletoads Arcade, we had a boss called Robomanus that you tried to beat, and we were having trouble balancing the game, so it felt like you could beat him if you were on your own when you weren't that good, versus if there was 3 players coming in and really hitting him.
We hit upon this idea of making him super tough at the start, even to the point where you couldn't actually do any damage to him.
For the first 45 seconds, nothing you did actually affected him in any way, but it looked like it did.
It's probably the best idea I've ever had in the industry. It's like, how can we make the final boss take more money? I know. Let's make it so he can't kill him.
There was a few games that we did that actually had a crossover element to them. I think one of the ones, which was a rather odd one, was Battletoads Double Dragon.
I'm guessing it came from...
I own it. I haven't played it yet. It is the only Battletoads game I have not beaten yet.
For both Battletoads and Double Dragon.
It just seemed a bit...
I gotta talk one of the boys into playing it with me.
Cartoon characters with expanding hands that turn into fists and drills, mixed up with these martial arts dudes from an arcade machine.
Being as the Toads were our characters and Billy and Jimmy weren't, we were pondering whether to make the Toads have better moves and be slightly stronger, so they'd always have this like slight advantage. But in the end, we did the right thing, and it was all fairly balanced.
From Battletoads, I think we were going to try and do a spin-off game called Warhogs with the character called Captain Pork. I think that was Tim's design. I can remember drawing these 2 characters that were like big, chunky warhog bikers, and they were going to shout pork swords every time they went into battle, but we didn't do it eventually.
Warhogs would have been good versus the Battletoads.
Battletoads ran over several different consoles. I think we had a Game Boy version, a Super NES version, an NES version, an arcade machine. We had a cartoon, so it's had a pretty good run of it, but I think it'd be quite a nice one to be revived. I'd always love to see a new Battletoads game out there. Maybe we'll make one.
Maybe they'll make one, and then 6 years later, they released it. So yeah, while this was coming out, they were still not even sure. Even though Xbox has been hitting it for a while. Conker, oh boy.
So Conker started out as a cute platformer. He was a standard Nintendo character. Squeaked, jumped.
Mario 64 had just arrived on the scene, and that was a game changer, I suppose, in terms of the next generation of games.
Of course, as soon as everyone saw that, we were like, okay, guess we better do something like that.
There was an awful lot of content and there was lots of fun ideas, but it just really wasn't gelling as a finished game.
And what happened was, as Banjo came along and they completely torpedoed us. I think Conquer, as it was sort of floundering as a concept because it was too similar.
Chris
And
Stevens
then
took
they
over.
changed it up.
He was working on art and then became designer on it.
I took the initiative and I came up with an idea that I thought might work.
I think he just wanted to give it a bit more of an edge, really, which is kind of his character as a person.
So we thought, well, let's just go for the comedy element, but let's make it more kind of edgy in terms of its violence. You know, let's get some narrative in there so we can get the personality of the character out.
For me, there was one key moment which turned it into the game that it was.
I think Tim came up with the idea for the beehive.
The beehive had been stolen from the bees by the nasty wasps.
But what wasn't in there was the reason why. It was the narrative and the punchline.
You're being chased by wasps, and you're coming down the path, and you have to return the queen her hive.
What can we do with that? Oh, I know. We'll make it violent. we'll make it completely over the top.
Eat that, mother buzzer.
That was kind of the light bulb moment, I suppose, for that game. And we showed that to Tim and Chris, and they went, "Yes, love it. Just make more of that."
Conquer was evolved over its life, and one of the things that came out of when we were designing levels were the movie parodies. I think the first one was the Terminator, and in the bottom it was each time you hit it, a bit would drop off. And in the cutscene, a bit dropped off his eye. And you can
So
see
many
behind it
movie
was a robot.
references.
Oh, we can get some Terminator cues in here.
Susie 9mm.
I'm right here, Susie. Tell me where to shoot.
Terminator, Saving Private Ryan.
And that's really where it came from. It was like, oh, actually, that worked really well. Because it gave us cues for things like music. It gave us ideas for the design itself, for the gameplay. So we did the Catfish one, which was Godzilla. I mean, there were films around
Godzilla.
at the time, so it was very much like
The Matrix.
a zeitgeisty thing. The Saving Private Ryan one.
Yeah, Saving
okay,
Private
well, we've got
Ryan.
a beach and you got to get up it.
We spent a lot of time really trying to get that feeling of, you know, the movies that you know and love. I spent months animating squirrels on fire with their legs falling off and their arms falling off, and there's a part where the squirrel picks up an arm and he sticks it back on and he's like, ooh. And I dreamt about squirrels like burning for like a long time. It had a real effect, I mean.
Oh yeah.
I was kind of.
I just
giving
finished
hints of
watching
the
all the
soundtrack.
Matrixes.
And the Matrix being another obvious one with the lobby scene, and that was quite a good interactive piece of music actually, because when you could hit the bullet time at any point, so we had this kind of channel fade on the music that kind of slowed down and went into this dreamy slow thing, and then back into the kind of hard hitting industrial beat.
If it hadn't have been the Matrix, if the movie parodies hadn't been there, the gameplay would have been completely different.
Oh,
And
yeah.
probably not as good. So it really complemented the game.
Cutscenes were kind of
Alien.
the sort of payoff at the end of the joke, the equivalent of our, Mario style. We had no script whatsoever. You'd say it's kind of this, it's kind of that, and we would just bounce ideas backwards and forwards.
The alien fight was really hard too.
I
That
think
took me a
helped
couple
because
hours.
It meant that it was a lot more fluid.
This worked because Chris was designing it, so he had a very good understanding of what the next task was, what you were going to do.
A lot of the creativity, certainly a lot of the funny stuff, just came out of the spontaneity of what we were doing.
We were so excited whenever a new scene came in. We knew we had something special because we'd still be giggling about it months later. Just the way a certain animation was or a way a certain word was said. You're normally sick to death of a game by the time it's finished.
Chris was doing like all the voices in Conquer. He wanted me to do a couple of the other characters as well. So he goes to me, we want Barry to be like American, so can you do an American accent? And I was like, literally never been anywhere in my life. I'd just flown over from Dublin, and all I could think of was to add like every so often. So it's, hi, you've reached like Barry's place? Awful. Even now when I hear it, I cringe.
The Mighty Pooh.
Mighty Pooh, he came about, as most things did with Conquer, it's just something Chris thought about, what can we do next to kind of repulse people or whatever, or make them laugh. And he just said, I want a boss that's a big giant turd that sings an opera.
Probably one of the most memorable characters in Conquer.
Me. I am the great mighty Pooh, and I'm going to throw my shit at you. A huge supply of tish comes from my chocolate starfish. How about some scat, you little twat?
It's really random. You're throwing toilet roll at a giant poo monster. So something beautiful had to come from that, and we're lucky it was Mr. Marlowe and his voice.
He does a fair bit of sort of amateur dramatics, and he's well into his singing.
So I know originally there were supposed to be these little sweet corn, and me and Ashley were going to be like the Mighty Pooh's backing singers.
It's going to be hard to beat that. It'll probably be on my gravestone. Here lies Chris Marlowe, voice of the great mighty Pooh.
Now that's what I call a bowel movement.
So the original design was actually a lot bigger. It was a much bigger game. We built a map, and it kind of got added to. Things got merged into other things.
Chris had the clever idea of getting the start sorted and the end sorted, and then it doesn't matter what you chop out of the middle, because people just won't know it was going to be there.
When I started, there was this huge sprawling land. By the time I ended, like most of the edge worlds had been cut out, and we just had focused on these bits in the center. I just remember looking at it one day and seeing lots of X's through a bunch of the worlds. We're like, we want to get this done in time. We're going to get rid of all this shit.
Mainly, the game is intact. Most of the stuff, surprisingly, is kept in. I mean, if you look at the amount of mechanics that were in Conquer, there's a lot. You know. Normally the first hour of a game is the most fun because it's all fresh. But with Conquer, it's still fresh at the end, and I think that's possibly why when people play it, they're surprised. They go, ooh, I thought this was just about a swearing squirrel. There was an unveiling, I think it was in Vegas at some English pub, where they showed it to the press for the first time, because this was kind of, I suppose they were all thinking it was going to be 12 Tales, cutesy, sort of Mario-esque type platformer. They showed them the Great Mighty Pooh, which was the big thing where everyone just went, what is this? I don't know. Everyone was laughing and stuff, but I think there was probably as many people with their jaws on the floor going, this is Nintendo.
Nintendo were very lenient, really, with an awful lot of stuff.
And Nintendo really supported it, and to the point that at E3, even though they showed it behind closed doors, they built a proper bar where you had to show ID to go in, and you could grab a beer and play the game. I mean, I played it fairly recently.
That's awesome.
And I'm shocked at some of the stuff. I probably would change some of the stuff now. The obvious one is the
sunflower. Yeah.
That whole sequence is like, no, I couldn't do that again. If it was made now and if it was the same team, it wouldn't. I don't think we'd do a game that people would want, because they'd want the original Conquer, but again, we're not the people to make that game, ironically, because we've changed. My tastes have changed and I've moved on. You'd have a hard time getting it made now. So the only way.
Yeah, they're not young 20-year-olds anymore.
I don't think there's going to be anything like it again.
Awesome. Killer Instinct. The one actually that I played the least. It only took like 2 hours to get everything for this game.
I knew who Rare was and I always respected them, but I never got to meet them until a week after I started at Nintendo. in come Tim and Chris Stamper with a 100% finished version of the first level of Donkey Kong Country. My first real task at Nintendo was to go figure out how much money it was going to take to buy all their hardware and software. Tim and Chris were like, there's this other game we'd like you to see. And they pitched me a game, funny enough, called Brute Force. That was Killer Instinct.
It wasn't really anything other than just a demo. But when Nintendo came and had a look at it, and they were looking at the 3D characters that we were building,
I own the real
they asked us if
Brute
we could
Force
do a
that came
fighting
out.
game based on that because they liked the way it looked.
They had a block button. They had no combos. It was just sort of a very
Who was that
simple.
made by?
I wouldn't say Mortal Kombat clone because they had some really good ideas of the way they were going to let you level up your character in the arcade, but it wasn't KI. So I'd been playing a ton of Street Fighter. I'm a huge fighting game fan. And so, like I usually do when I meet with developers, like, that was a great idea. What if you did this?
Within the first 5 minutes of being in the game, he was going kapow, pow, ka, ku, ku. And he was really into his martial arts films and his martial arts games, and so we thought maybe we've got a real enthusiast here.
Yeah, it was made by
Him and
Xbox.
Chris Tilston together and kind of came up with a combo system, developed that, and took it to the next level.
I wrote this spec, about 10 pages of here's the way we should think about combos for Killer Instinct. And
It's
in
a
that
completely
original
different game. It's a third-person game.
doc, you know, we talked about just
I'll play it
open, auto
sometime.
double, and finisher. It was Rare that came up with the idea of linkers. They came up with air juggles. But we again had to build all this from the animation set that we had in place.
When we first started putting the animation into Killer Instinct, we tried hand animation, but then we switched over to using a motion capture suit.
The best motion capture device that we could buy, and that's what we looked for, was something called Flock of Birds. It was basically a tethered solution. In other words, every one of these little sensors that was on the
Turn my
body
phone,
of the motion
please.
capture artist had to be connected to a wire that went to a harness that connected to this huge apparatus on the ceiling.
We got the 3D animation from data which was pulled in from small magnets which were on different parts of the body.
You had to stand on this stage that underneath had a humongous electromagnet. These were all basically being detected by this giant magnet. And because the technology was young, it broke every time we did a character.
The good thing about it was you could tell who was in the suit by who was moving around because of their weight and their size. And I remember putting high heels on and getting into the motion capture suit to try and walk like a lady.
Over time, we got good at, let's capture the special moves first and a whole bunch of just regular punches. You know, we think they're gonna look like this. And if Flock of Birds didn't go down at the end of our session, we'd have a whole bunch of extra moves. But some of our characters we had to build moves out of because the Flock of Birds stopped working. And so it's like, well, we don't really have the move that we wanted. Well, we can build it out of these parts of these other moves. It's not a 3D game. All we had to do was find the frames that would look right with hits.
Yeah,
Sometimes
that's true.
legs would be in strange angles. We didn't care. What we cared about was what the actual combo ended up looking like.
Some of the characters, I think, were inspired by some of the films that I used to watch when I was a kid. I used to be a big fan of films like Jason and the Argonauts or anything that had the Ray Harryhausen animation in there. The skeletons, the Greek gods, they always look fantastic. So we had the opportunity to make some monsters, so we put Spinal in there, and Idol and Gargos. They were influenced by a lot of the features that you could produce with Maya. You could produce fire, and you could produce ice and water, so of course you're going to produce a fireman and an iceman. So we came up with Glacius and with Cinder. Sable Wolf was, of course, a bit of a throwback to the old Ultimate game, Sable Wolf. Jago actually started off as a test generic character for the motion capture, and so I built a ninja, and because hair was quite a difficult thing to animate, I gave him this big quiff at the front, and it began to look a little bit more like my hairstyle at the time, so it kind of got tagged that I was that character and I was building myself. It wasn't true, it was just a guy in sort of a rubber suit, which I haven't got. I tell a lie, I have got a rubber suit, but I don't wear that so often now.
So I go there for my third visit to Rare. This is all in a pretty short period of time. And we built Jago's moveset. We did the motion capture for Jago, and we built his first open auto double and finisher combo. That was the first combo that was built for Killer Instinct. But what we didn't have was audio.
So we first tried out cries and some hit noises for Jago. And we did it really crudely with just a microphone and like a cassette deck on the floor. It sounded awful. I think Martin Hollis said at the time, "You just sound like a brumming ninja."
I get Chris Tilston on the phone. "Dude, you gotta hear this. You gotta hear it." And what? And it's like, well, we put sound effects in, and they put the phone up to the mic, and you hear. We'd also done grunts and pain. So when you're attacking, and when you're getting hits, so you had the Jago attacking sounds, all the hit sounds, and the Jago taking damage sounds, because it was just Jago versus Jago, and it sounded amazing. And it was like addicting to them. Once they got that, they were like, "We are so on."
And the Kilkin! And all of the different, all those hit sounds, they were myself on Jago. I think I put a mouthful of yogurt in behind the microphone, and that was how I did the voice for Glacius. One of the main voices that people remember from Killer Instinct was the announcer.
Ultra!
I suppose Sud came around from his announcer voice in Battletoads.
You immediately imagine this huge, big, hulking guy, but it's Chris.
He just had a really powerful voice. He almost blew the mic, actually.
We made some things really loud. So if even an operator came in and was like, "This game's kind of loud, I'll turn it down," you heard Ultra Combo! Or you heard them scream out. Once a combo got about 6 or 7 hits, we upped the volume of the announcer. We made sure that every hit effect was very, very snappy and had punch, really high highs on some of these hits. And then we'd layer them with a low end that would make them carry like all the way across the arcade.
Joel Hochberg was our associate in America, and he owned a few amusement arcades, and so we would often put a machine in one of the arcades.
I've been to a couple arcade bars and
whether it attracted
playing this game. It is loud.
The arcade industry was going like this. In fact, we were concerned before we shipped that maybe we've missed the arcade business.
Joel's son, Scott, he said to me that there was just a crowd of people standing by this machine, so we knew that we were onto something that was going to be pretty popular.
It was taking a lot. It was like $25,000 a week or something. It was one thing that we were using to test it.
The team built an arcade machine, pilot, the engine to build the game, the cabinet, the controls, the art, the entire game, everything, in about 10.5 months.
We come in at 9 and we go home at probably midnight.
These guys were young and adrenaline-filled.
We spent such a lot of time late at night, early in the morning, just living, eating, sleeping, breathing, fighting games.
When KI-1 shipped, nothing else was close. Visually, it was beautiful, and you could hear it from all the way across the arcade.
Awesome. On to the next. Which is... Viva Pinata.
Describing Viva Pinata to anyone is a bit weird.
Before
Very
this year,
brightly coloured.
I love Viva Pinata.
Garden simulator.
Very calming.
A gardening game where you had to look after Pinata characters or little cute animals in a garden and kind of like become friends with them and kind of farm in a way.
The player attracts, befriends and keeps a host of papery creatures in their garden.
It's just almost a garden of chaos that you have to try and corral and control in your own special way and customising it into your own image.
It was a 6-page document that Tim Stamper had written. The story I always remember is he talked about a hawk moth that he found, a hummingbird hawk moth that he found in his garden. And he'd just seen it one day when he was out. It was lovely and sunny, shined on a flower, and this really strange creature was hovering above one of the flowers. And he identified it, and then he looked about what sort of things he would need to make more of those appear in his garden. And that was the idea for the whole game.
It's just kind of nature's food chain and life cycle, so it's kind of like, can we turn that into a fun game?
We thought we'd be able to work on a kind of a mobile device of some sort, with this idea starting with, nothing and this one seed, and then, ending up with a whole sort of menagerie of animals and stuff.
Microsoft had a device called a Pocket PC, which was like this little kind of handheld, shrunk down PC device, which we thought would be an ideal platform. It was portable, it had sufficient power, and we could do all these ideas of how the pinatas moved around. But the Pocket PC was never to be, and we kind of moved it onto Xbox, which gave us the obviously the graphical fidelity and the grunt to make it look awesome. We certainly spent some time trying to work out what the pinata should look like.
I was tasked with trying to come up with a style that would bring everything together. And so there's lots of ideas about them being toys or being kind of like soft kind of ragdoll things, or even just kind of like a generic cartoon looking thing. But what we wanted to do was something that made it all feel like a family. I really liked some of the graphics and artwork around luchadors. And so I've got this whole kind of Mexican thing kind of bubbling in my head at the time. And then realised that if we turn these characters into pinatas, it would gel the entire world together. So the lizard is a pinata and the horse is a pinata, even though they're a different species and a different thing, it still kind of gelled it all together.
It was quite clear almost immediately that it was going to have a better home on a bigger console that allowed us to do more of the animal behaviour things that we wanted.
Because I think the first time I got my hands on it, it was still quite early. There was an awful lot of grass and there were some bunnies, which I always enjoy. But my residing memory of that was the fact that you could mate pinatas at that point to create their offspring, but the mating code wasn't exactly solid.
We really, really wanted the idea that the animals behaved in a natural way, but we had to find ways for us to explain it to people that didn't just make us seem like we were filthy perverts. So what we came up with was the romance dance. People just loved those dance routines, and it was perfectly charming, and nobody, we didn't really have any problems with people having animals reproducing all over their screen.
The artist Neil Price said, look, I've got a great idea. Every romance dance, we can have a different style of music. And I was like, yeah, that's great. And I suddenly thought, just a minute, that's 60 animals? That's going to be a lot. So we had like 20 seconds of like dance music or ballroom dancing or metal or punk. I made tons of fun making the noises for the animals. Like I did tons of them, I can't even remember. 60 animals or something like that.
Initially, we started looking at real animal noises, but it just felt wrong. We suggested that the people on the team just took animals and then made noises for them. We had all the animations in ready to go, so we could just come up to the music department, sit and watch the animations and try and make any type of noise that we thought would fit. So after the first game, it was proposed that we were going to do a DS version of the game, which just seemed like insanity. It just seemed crazy to try and cram that huge game into such a small device. And we gave it to the team we had here, our internal handheld team. And we kind of forgot about it. And then a few months later, pretty much stuff was coming into the studio and we were approving it. And it appeared, this version, this DS version of our enormous game that we'd struggled to get going on an Xbox 360 and get all the features we wanted. And they pretty much had it feature complete on a much smaller, much more reduced handheld. So they did just an incredible job. So a bunch of the work we'd done kind of rolled straight into the next game. It gave us a leg up so that we could start immediately working on the sequel.
We had this big discussion about whether we should try and squeeze everything that we wanted into 6 months and create some DLC, or should we try and create some time, like give ourselves 18 months and create a full sequel.
At the time we wanted different environments, the deserts, we wanted underwater stuff, we were talking about kind of having a whole, expanding the universe of Pinatas to be a lot wider, so it just seemed like a natural thing to do, and as I say, no one told us not to, so we rolled straight into it.
We want to carry on to make this the best that it can be. So yeah, I think Pinata 2 was pretty much driven out of developer passion.
I'm really proud of the score. I'm writing the music track. I'm really proud of it. I thought I did a good job on that one. Bedtime Story from Viva Pinata 2. It's on my website, that one. That was my favourite. It was the last piece that we recorded in Prague. It's a really emotional tearjerker for me. And that one has really always been my favourite track, I think. It still is almost to this day. And I remember I had to go, the recording finished, and the guy said to me, you should go out to the orchestra, thank the orchestra. And I kind of went onto the podium and went, you know, you've all played so, and just burst into tears like that.
There was all of these games over here, all kind of brown and green and blue, and then over here was like Pinata. It was like bright and lively and full of colours, and offered a very, very different type of game to what was available.
People really took it to heart, and we got reports back of some really interesting things. People playing the game and then doing things in the real world that were to do with our game. And one of those was, and was fairly widely reported at the time, was a guy that proposed to his future wife through our game. And he organised a garden. He used the ring item that could be made inside the game, and he'd invited her to a match that they shared together. And he sent a crate, I think, over with the ring inside, and the message was a marriage proposal.
The end result, really happy. I couldn't pick one thing that I thought, you know, was a favourite. It's just the whole thing was again another really great game to have made.
The market's changed quite a lot now, where more different games and slightly more unusual games that seem to be far more accepted. So I think there's something to pick up in a package full of lots of rare games. I think it'll be well thought of, and it'll be a little gem of kind of oddness.
I think people like Viva Pinata. It's a much deeper game than people think, because it had that cutesy rare bit on the top of it, but underneath it was pretty complicated.
Hopefully there'll be people that have played it before will kind of rediscover the kind of charm that the garden had, but I think hopefully there'll be a kind of a new set of players that will kind of hopefully appreciate the kind of being in a really special world.
Yes, Viva Pinata, such a great game. Really to see that everybody else also cared about it. They just wanted to make it really cute and calm. Ooh. This one's gonna be really cool. Especially for a game I didn't even know was a thing until this.
Blast School was codenamed Bull during its development at Rare. I'm pretty sure that's short for Bulldozer and not anything else.
There was Heavy Duty, which I quite liked. I thought that would have been good. Heavy Metal.
There's a version out with Blast Radius.
Power Dozer.
Then we went to Blast Dozer, and it was Blast Dozer for a while, and its first debut at Shinkai in 1995. But we ran into a problem where the name wasn't trademarked worldwide, so the American version and the European version became called Blast School. It was a project that had been started, I believe, about 10 times at Rare over various different formats.
I think it was Chris Stamper who came up with the original concept that knocking over buildings would be fun.
What we needed to do was find a purpose for the gameplay.
It's quite a difficult thing to do, really, because buildings don't fight back at all. They're just sat there.
So we came up with the idea of the constant moving object, which was a vehicle that moved through the level.
You had to knock down buildings in a way of this runaway truck.
It didn't really have an identity to start off with, but it eventually ended up looking like a sausage transporter or a Savoy truck, as we thought. People always wanted to have a more control over it, but that was kind of the point of the game, was it was always predictable and you knew where it was. I mean, it wasn't a particularly new concept. There were games like Lemmings, which you control what happened to the characters rather than control the characters themselves. There was quite a lot of influence on Blastcore. One of the more subtle ones was probably Thunderbirds. It was an international rescue team where they used a variety of vehicles specific to each mission. We would kind of design an environment and then work out which vehicles would best suit the environment. Blastcore had a reputation, possibly unfairly, being a very hard game as well.
Playing this
it was
game,
a reflection of
I was really
the type
scared
of game players we were
there
at
was,
the time. The most obvious one is
an achievement, I believe, to get platinum on everything. Or no, to get a platinum, so that means you have to get gold on everything first.
Animating textures, like render the texture so there was a light
Holy
source.
crap, some of those levels I thought I would not be able to do.
Late correctly, it was just...
And this was after beating Battletoads, so I was already really angry at this game. Because I thought Battletoads was going to be the only thing holding me back, but I was wrong.
You had to swing around the back end skids and get the back end to go into the buildings to knock them over.
That was actually the mechanic from Mario Kart. It was a jump turn in Mario Kart, so you press the button and swing the back end of the truck around. Some of the later vehicles became a bit more flamboyant. We had our artist Ricky Berwick. Basically, he would come up with the idea and we'd just try and shoehorn that into the game.
In vogue was manga at the time, so we ended up kind of trying to spice it up a bit by putting a lot of robots and things in there.
So, for instance, if you look at Thunder Fist, it's only got one arm. Because we ran out of polygons, it wouldn't fit in memory, so we actually just took an arm off, and that's how it appears in the game.
I mean, we had quite a few vehicles in Blastcore. A lot of them didn't get very far, and a lot of them were developed just as test vehicles when we were using the N64 emulator.
Lee Ray did a lot of cool designs.
Some of them didn't get in because, well, they were more just of a, something which was supposed to look nice rather than play well. That kind of came later for a lot of the vehicles. Some of them didn't get in because they were just too out there, basically. There was one with a groin cab in it. Don't ask why, it was very strange.
There was quite a lot of vehicles we ruled out. The main criteria had to be that had a unique ability to knock down buildings, so I think in some of the early demos, and even at Shoshinkai, we featured a Scorpion model.
I remember Richard Wilson putting the Scorpion thing in, it was like...
The thing was they didn't have a unique enough ability, so yeah, you just walk on looking like a Scorpion, but it just runs into stuff. We struggled to make those into fun vehicles that could actually have a proper destructive purpose.
There's quite a variety of tunes in Blastcore, and I put it down to partly Martin Wakely giving me the freedom to do that, but also more than likely because I can't concentrate on anything for more than 5 minutes, so I just go off and...
Yeah, I wish they would have switched out the dump truck.
Yeah, when we
for
started on
Scorpion.
Blastcore, we didn't even have the hardware available.
That dump truck sucked.
A massive fridge-sized computer.
I'm sitting there and I had like an Onyx beside me, which is like a £250,000 machine.
I know the artists were working on machines that were supposed to emulate what the N64 would be, but this was years before it came out, so we were all kind of doing stuff in the dark a little bit.
We had so much equipment, it created a bit of a hot house, so there was like the temperatures used to get astronomical. No aircon, so but we toughed it out.
The hardware changed all the way through, so the final specs for the N64 were nailed down to quite a long way towards the end of the project.
To be honest, it was a great relief to get the final hardware, and I think we actually got the first boards in Europe, actually, from what I remember. There was just a couple.
The main feature that didn't get in that I was gutted about was the rumble pack.
I remember seeing the very first prototype of it, and it was a tiny little motor with a bit of solder on it that span round, and I remember at the time thinking that was terrible, and we were asked to use it and I vetoed it and said that I didn't think it would be of any use, and it's now become completely standard in the industry, so proves how little I know. Start to finish it took us 13 months with a core team of 4 graduates basically, and then we got another 2 or 3 people in towards the end, but I think there was never more than 7 people working on the game at any time.
So I think the cancel button was like that. And then obviously I think because we really wanted to do it, they just kind of let us do it.
Blastcore was received pretty well. I think it got good reviews. Some people didn't know how to take it though.
I mean, basically I went out and bought every magazine that had a review, even the German one I bought. I had every review of Blastcore and took it all personally.
It's a bit of a cult classic and people still talk to me about it now.
We were a young company, as in most of us were in our early 20s, and absolutely dedicated to what we were working on.
There's a lot of people just used to come in because we were all computer geeks and we had no homes to go to, basically. Like a place for lost boys to come and make computer games.
And I'm happy they did. So now on to the last video here. Jet Force Gemini.
Jet Force Gemini was a third-person space shooting game. No one had ever really done a third-person targeting system, and we kind of did a lot of groundwork on that.
We kind of introduced as well quite early on though an adventure element, so it was kind of, if you think of things like Mario 64 and Tomb Raider at the time, that kind of thing, we wanted it to feel like it was this big world still that you could explore in, and you didn't just have to go around shooting everything. So we did a lot of work trying to get the balance right between being able to adventure and being able to feel like you had enough accuracy and enough enjoyment in the shooting to make it feel like a proper fully fledged shooter.
I remember Paul Mountain and Martin Wakely huddled over the keyboard. Paul was stripping back all the code that he didn't need from Diddy Kong Racing.
Yeah, this
and
was
then working with Martin to come up with a nice,
fun
tight,
game, but screw that
third-person shooter control
100%.
scheme.
Finding all
It
the
was also
little
we wanted it
guys.
to be challenging, not just to be kind of a very lightweight game. So you had the kind of standard thing where you could play through the game and you'd maybe get to like
Yeah, all those
40-50%
guys.
completion
I forget
and
what
get a
they're
kind of
called.
reward, if you like, for getting to that point in the game. But there was also all these kind of side challenges, and one of them, probably the most famous one in terms of people who played it, is the one for collecting all the tribals.
Yep.
Because that could be quite tricky if you were a bit kind of trigger happy, because you could lose a few in the crossfire. So, it was a lot of fun to make. Everybody who was on there was kind of mad about space games and space films, for that matter. We'd all kind of grown up on this stuff in the 70s, 80s and early 90s.
Martin would kind of spec out the designs for how the level should work, but really in terms of the visuals and even down to a lot of the finer details, we had so much fun.
Yeah, even the
I
final
remember
boss on
early in
this
the
one was
project
kinda tough.
making a trip into Birmingham to go to the big comic shops there, just looking for sci-fi comics.
I'm getting a
and,
pattern.
Toy catalogues that were full of
Rare
kind of
makes
spaceship
hard
toys and robot
bosses.
toys.
Visually, we were very influenced by a 1980s cartoon called Battle of the Planets. And the original character models all look like that. We eventually changed the character models, but the original look was very much based on that cartoon series.
The team lead was Martin Wakely, and I went to him to talk about the music, and he said, well, we're basing the game on old school arcade games, and there isn't any music in old school arcade games, so I was a bit stuck to know where to go with. And luckily, Robin Beanland took over and did a very, very good job on music.
It was a pretty tight timeline to get the score done for Jet Force. So Martin was kind of just basically whatever you want to do with it. It's, you know, it's up to you. And I decided to sort of go more the sort of John Williams sci-fi orchestral type thing. Get as close to an orchestra as I could do with a small amount of memory and a cartridge. Really, really pleased with that. Really pleased with the theme tune, which is actually an old Conker tune. We had a stadium in 12 Tales and I used that tune and sort of filled it out and, you know, made more of it.
So there were some quite off-the-wall things in Jet Force. We had the kind of main game, the kind of cohesive space game, but then we had a bit of fun as well while we were making it. So there were lots of little things that kind of made it into there. One of them was the fish food.
So the fish food in Jet Force was probably one of the most controversial features, bizarrely. The fish food was there to feed fish, and that's all it did. And that seemed to infuriate some people who felt it should have a higher purpose.
So what does the fish food do? And the answer would be, you use it to feed fish. Then the question will come back, what can you actually do with it? What could you use the fish food for in the game? And the answer was you feed fish with it. And this was just a recurring theme about what the actual fish food, what purpose the fish food served in the game.
So there was a lot of hidden stuff in Jet Force Gemini. I put a lot of content in that game. There was 2 different race games featured in the game. One of them was a top-down arcade racer, heavily influenced by Super Sprint, but that was called Jeff and Barry Racing, which was in the arcade, which was in the nightclub, I believe. And there was also an Into the Screen racing game, which had a lot of time put into it. And also we featured, I think we were the first Rare game to feature Mr. Pants.
You could turn all the ants into Mr. Pants and they all kind of hobbled awkwardly around the background as you shot them. So that was quite fun as well.
But we ran
never
into some
got that
problems with the age rating because we realised then you could obviously decapitate a man dressed in underwear, which wasn't what we expected to do when we started making the game. So I think a few compromises had to be made on that, and setting Mr. Pants on fire was ditched from the game as well.
I do remember on the end of Jet Force we were desperate to get a lot of stuff in there, so we kept kind of trying to get these features working, and as a result, we probably ended up spending some weeks towards the end where we were doing maybe like 80, 90 hours. I remember driving home some mornings at like 5 o'clock in the morning, going to bed for a few hours and then coming back in about 9. But it was just, you just loved doing it because it was something that you really wanted to get work in, and you wanted it to look the way and sound the way and feel the way that you wanted. So you're kind of driven along by this kind of passion for making it work and getting the game just how you wanted it to be.
One thing we were particularly proud of was the co-op, the drop-in, drop-out co-op. Someone could come in, plug a joystick in, and then join in, and then play as Floyd the robot and leave when they felt like it. As far as I'm aware, there was nothing like that at the time.
I think
Well,
on the
I
team
played
we
solo,
were really
so I
generally
didn't
quite
even use that
satisfied
feature.
with the critical reviews we got. We got lots of 8s out of 10s, 9s out of 10s, and always lots of compliments for the art as well, which is particularly pleasing from our point of view. I think the creative energy of everyone on that team really shines through in the product. We loved working on it because we had so much creative input ourselves.
Not by any means do I think it's a faultless game, but I hope that it was a fun game that people could enjoy, and it was a bit more kind of, I don't know, off the wall, I suppose, compared to a lot of games.
It's still a real gem of a game, and definitely worth checking out.
That it was. Okay, and that is all the making ofs. I think they tackled everything I was... Wait, Perfect Dark. They didn't talk about Perfect Dark, did they? Perfect Dark would have been fun to see. Concept showcases. So this is just gonna be Cameo, Nuts and Bolts, Perfect Dark Zero. Okay, not too many.
I'm Mark Stevenson, and I was art director on Cameo Elements of Power.
Cameo was cool, but screw the achievements.
The look of Cameo
Rare
was an
got
animator
dumb
called
on the
Richard Boucher.
achievements.
He had worked on previous Rare titles and was trained in classical hand-drawn animation. An obvious visual starting point for Cameo's character is that she was a fairy and a princess, although later to be called an elf. She needed to look graceful, feminine, and in touch with nature, but also be a strong female lead. First and foremost, ideas for how our characters look comes from what they do in the game and those practical considerations. Cameo always had a magical hit bag from the outset because she needed somewhere to store things. She also had the jeweled headband because we needed to contain the element of power. In contrast, Callus is pretty much a classic archetypal villain design. From the outset, she had the black dress, the dark hair, the pale skin, designed to be the opposite of Cameo's goodness. Cameo's original costume was inspired by ancient Greek clothing, but was changed with the console version. She needed to look more mature, and the new look was inspired by Native American patterns and culture. In the GameCube days of Cameo, we had plans for a larger number of monsters across more elements. Some were used to travel across the levels, others being purely for combat, able to use elemental moves like freezing things or breathing fire. However, as the project progressed, we scaled the number down. Each environment had to work to our elemental mechanics. They also had to fit the narrative points. We drew the fairy kingdom as a floating island, and this was really to portray it as a heavenly utopia in the sky where these unearthly magical creatures lived. The battlefield that we introduced for the Xbox 360 version was probably the most challenging level to create. It was a massive environment, bigger than any we'd built before, and linking all the different diverse parts of the world together. And if that wasn't challenging enough, we also populated it with thousands of trolls and a load of epic battles. Again, abilities define how trolls look. Regular trolls look strong, muscular and powerful, whereas the archer trolls are much easier to defeat and look less imposing and less protected in their light armor.
This didn't come out on the GameCube.
The bomb trolls are little irritating guys that are obviously weedy, so use bombs to keep you at bay. We did have elemental trolls too, designed to be funny hybrids. They tried to capture the use of magic by splicing elemental monsters with trolls and created these mutated but funny freaks. The troll tech, being a fantasy world, had a kind of steampunk-powered aspect applied to it. There was always a strong intent to create a clear division. Cameo and the monsters represented nature, magic and the mystical, whereas the trolls were about brute force and technology. Thorn was about reinforcing that visceral animalistic aspect of strength being power. So he was naturally very big compared to the regular trolls. We had a couple of early designs where he was more demon-like, but these felt too far removed, so he came back to looking closer to the other trolls. The project was a labour of love. 6 years, 3 consoles, but still we finished and released it. Cameo got a lot of fans, and I would really love to make another one. It allowed us to let our imaginations go wild.
Yeah, Cameo wasn't a bad game, but I don't know how they would make another. Alright, nuts and bolts. This weird game. Not bad, just weird.
Hi, my name is Ryan Stevenson, one of the concept artists from Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts. Before the team even knew we were making a game about construction, we looked at the possibilities of revamping the characters in the Banjo universe. Our question, how do we update these characters without losing any of the charm of the original? We tried many different approaches, but ultimately settled on one that would retain the character's history. Originally called Banjo Buildy, the world had to look like it was assembled. Our surfaces were stitched, worn, and put together. This was a game where the players saw the progress via construction. Here's a selection of artwork for you to enjoy.
Oh boy. Yeah. They did make it look like a Banjo game at least. Not having all the powers is, you know, a little different, but I understand they wanted you to do the vehicles. Okay, yeah. I'm glad they kept Mojo the same. They did change up Mumba. He's weird. thinking about having Kazooie out all on their lonesome. Alrighty. So I get it, construction, because it's all based on jiggies and puzzles anyway. Oh god, alright, Perfect Dark Zero. Let's see what they have to say.
Initiating data breach. Hacking algorithms integrated.
Hi, I'm Will Overton, and I was art director on Perfect Dark Zero. One visual influence for PDZ was Captain Scarlet. It summed up what the art team and I were aiming for. A realistic yet fantastical world for a broad audience. A game that was a shooter for gamers of all ages. Making Joanna younger gave the team a level of freedom to explore her character. The team concluded that Joanna needed to display more personality, to be more than just bondy and cool. She would be talented but flawed, hot-headed and eager to get involved, eventually maturing as the story progressed. The team went through lots of ideas and designs for Joanna's outfits. I was keen that, as a character, she would be recognisable in lots of different costumes, and at one point hairstyles. Joanna's civilian attire was the trickiest, creating a casual outfit for a young woman set in the near future. You're doomed before you start, so I played it safe with combat trousers and a star vest and avoided anything too contemporary. For Joanna's suited costume, I ditched the chrome plating and tidied up her appearance. The new design aimed to get across a feeling of rebellious, untamed youth. Mayhem remained an uncomplicated character. She was a femme fatale, complete with silly name and a score to settle. Initially, I was adamant that she should not be over-sexualised, but eventually the archetype shone through and Mayhem retained her slinky design. Her final cyborg form was very much a late addition when the team began to ramp up the outlandishness of some of the characters.
I tried not to make her tits stand out, but...
At this stage of the project, the team had decided that the characters should fit strong archetypes. Zang Li is a traditional villain, a rich industrialist running organised crime across the world. His Chinese style can be traced back to the worlds of Fu Manchu and Iron Man's The Mandarin.
Yep.
His design was an attempt to mix the shapes and sizes of the game's characters. The idea of giving Zang Li a wasting disease was to give him a reason for his actions. His motivation was to try and cure himself, not just to rule the world. Perfect Dark Zero's sense of scope meant that every level needed to be different. Joanna travelled the world, and originally went off-world to an orbiting space prison. The story was told on a global scale, with different locations to explore and infiltrate. Skeedar didn't feature in PDZ, but the team did try to hint at some alien presence. I very quickly did some hieroglyph designs to put on a temple wall, but they ended up everywhere, from magazines to the code cards that came with the special edition, and even Zang Li's sword at the end of the game. During the game's story, Joanna has to play a virtual reality FPS game.
Yeah, you gotta hint at aliens, but you can't
This is
show
also
them.
the game's multiplayer arena mode. The team wanted to tie the two together, so they felt part of the same
Playing
universe.
multiplayer.
While many of the guns
with my
in
brother
PDZ
was
tried to
really
crush their
fun.
favourites,
It made this game a lot
there was
better.
still a chance to have fun with some of the more fantastical weapons and gadgets. I mostly stayed away from the guns, but there were some unexpected designs, like the Shrimp Jack mind control pistol. This would shoot a small electronic shrimp at an enemy that would bury itself in their
Matrix
ear
style.
and allow them to be controlled from a distance. The Shrimp Jack eventually became the Psychosis gun in the final game. Perfect Dark Zero took 5 years to make and managed to span 3 different consoles. I'm happy that I got the experience, and it's great to see the game get a new lease of life 10 years on.
Yep, when it comes to the actual story, it wasn't bad. But, oh, those achievements. Oh, man.
Terminating link.
What did it come out to be? It was like 96 hours. And the last one, Viva Pinata.
Hi, I'm Ryan Stevenson. and I was a concept artist on Viva Pinata. The game you see today wasn't the intended direction at all. Originally called My Garden at the Pocket PC, the animals had a simple cartoony style, but we needed a look that unified all the creatures of the world together, a style that implied a collection. I think some of my influences for Pinata came from what I was playing and watching at the time. Animal Crossing, Cubivore, Doshin the Giant and Watership Down, but that was only the first step. I like to immerse myself completely into the subject and find my reference by source. I didn't want this project to be a recreation of someone else's interpretation. At the time I was fascinated by Mexican culture, researching into festivals such as Day of the Dead and cultural things like luchadors. I instantly loved the treatment of vibrant colours and patterns, and I remembered being in a Mexican restaurant in New York seeing a pinata hanging from a ceiling. That's how it all kind of slotted in together, and the pinatas in our game were born. We created a rule set for the pinata. They don't have any muscles or bones. We wanted players to feel like they could crack them open. They had to feel like magical objects that had sprung to life. The first animals we focused on were things that you could find in a small holding, creatures that we already had a relationship with. From there we grew into something that felt more like a larger ecosystem. Every pinata was important, even something as small as an insect. Players could simply find their own favourites. A lot of work went into finding the quintessential animal form. For example, the dog went through many variations before we settled on its final design. I went with a terrier breed because I wanted him to look fun, and these dogs are packed with so much energy and personality, it seemed like a perfect match. Some of the designs I'm most proud of are the Hooty Fruity, Fudge Hog and Pyena, but the Raspberry is my absolute favourite. I like its simple patterning and his animation was a lot of fun. I actually made him into a real pinata and he's still knocking around the studio today, a little faded but still well loved. For Trouble in Paradise, cool. We had to create even more animals. Chris Phillips joined the team and it was great to see someone take the pinata rule set and create something new. Just like fan art, it's always fun to see someone's take on the world. Pests were a new breed of pinata. With a little extra work from the player, they could be tamed and eventually would live in your garden. Again, we took the important elements from animals and streamlined their designs. The inspiration for the pest patterns were taken from tribal tattoos. This gave them a defining look when next to regular pinatas. The world in which all these creatures lived was given just as much care. It's all about attention to detail and the level of decoration. Even the dirt and grass has patterning. I wanted it to look handmade. Every mark you see has been placed individually. We wanted the player to feel as though there was more to this world, that it lived and breathed, that it existed. Having the garden help us makes the world feel inhabited. Even all the villagers have backstories to make this place feel rich. For example, the post lady wanted to be a fashion designer, and that's why she adapted her own outfit. I loved working on Pinata. It was a fun game made by a great team. We were left to squirrel away and come up with ideas that we still feel proud of today.
Awesome. Brian Stevenson. He is a big artist. Okay, and now to the final. Never mind. Previously unseen. Sundown, The Fast and the Furious, Cameo 2, Black Widow Tailwind. Alright. Oh boy. Hold it. The Sundown documentary contains imagery that may... Yes. Ooh, a spooky game.
Hi, I'm Peter Hentz, and I was one of the concept artists on Sundown. This project was Rare's second foray into the horror genre. It was set in a world where a biological parasite which infects and mutates living organisms had caused a catastrophic breakdown of society. The concept art team were tasked to create a host of monsters that would shock and repulse the player. Creatures from your worst nightmares. In terms of visual design, we took a lot of inspiration from John Carpenter's 1982 movie, The Thing. Ooh. Body horror at its finest. There's something terrifying about seeing the human form warped into a hideous monstrosity. This sense of disgust was something we really wanted to key into in order to put the player on edge and instill a real sense of fear. Mother Nature also provided us with a great source of inspiration, and we drew reference from a whole host of weird and wonderful creatures, from larvae to
Like
deep-sea
Fallout,
creatures,
okay.
studying their strange forms
So
and
what
textures.
type of game would this be? I know a horror. But
Players would find themselves traveling through deserted towns and homesteads. The idea was that you could move around during the day, searching for medical supplies, food, and weaponry. Ultimately, you'd have to find a place that you could fortify and rig with traps, because when the sun went down, these infected creatures would descend in their droves looking for their next victims. Thematically, we were looking at the source of the infection being linked to a parasite that contaminated the water supply. When it comes into contact with a host, it bonds with them and mutates their DNA, forcing physical mutation. The victim's transformation would happen in stages, beginning with slight variations to the human form and progressively
how would
warping
you
the host into a
purify the
twisted,
water? Do you
visceral
cook
bundle
it?
of flesh and claw. The host would take on the characteristics of the parasite: bumpy, translucent skin, tentacles, and sharp, bony protrusions. Like zombies from George Romero's movies, the infected were driven by the mindless, singular purpose to consume and could never be bargained with. One of my favorite monster designs was Fingerbelly. This poor guy has really had a bad time of it. Most of his body's been given over to this horrendous mouth. The mutations between bloaters would vary dramatically. Some would split in half to expose a large creature.
Bloaters.
Some appeared to look like pregnant women, which would crawl after you and spew forth a horrible mass of limb and tentacle. We also explored the idea of having infected children as an enemy. We called them crawlers. They were small, elusive, and fast,
God.
scaling any surface with ease, allowing them to ambush when you least
Now,
expect
yeah,
it.
that would have been a little terrifying.
Infected children were never as horribly disfigured as their adult counterparts, as their sole purpose was to transfer the infection. It created an uncomfortable dilemma for the player, as you naturally wouldn't want to harm a child. Since the player was to carry guns and
So that's why it
improvise
got
melee
cancelled.
weapons, it seemed the players
Killing
might take a more
kids.
harsh and final approach to dealing with them. Ultimately, this didn't sit well with the team, and we decided to drop the idea of having infected kids.
Yeah,
Sundown was a great project to work on, and even though it didn't continue, it was given a chance to shine in one of our studio's creative jams. A new team within Rare picked up the idea and created a prototype over a few weeks that showcased some of the survival features.
Okay. So it'd be just a bunker down zombie game. Matt Perry. Oh, okay. Fast and the Furious? Furriest?
I'm Will Overton, and I was a concept artist on Fast and Furriest.
Oh, is it Conquer?
Fast and Furriest was Rare's homage to karting games. With inspiration taken from Diddy Kong Racing, we strove to update the genre. Taking Rare-owned characters, we aimed to make each feel special, giving them appropriate real-world vehicles that match their style. Players could affect and be affected by the environment on both a grand and detailed
And you
scale.
could add Banjo
On a large
and...
level, the characters carried Banjo's magical wrench, wielding it much like a lasso, enabling them to destroy and build bridges, to pick apart opponents' cars and take the vehicle's parts for themselves. On a smaller scale, they could take an advantage by riding in the tyre tracks of those in front to gain speed and alter their perfect route. Players could even build a car
drafting.
suited to their racing type, whether they wanted speed, the ability to
Show
bash
me
others
the
out of the way,
Battletoads.
or to leave
Show me the
booby traps on the
Battletoads.
road. If Banjo Nuts and Bolts was Rare's Lego, then Fast and Furriest was its Duplo, immediately accessible. These vehicles could have any accessory or weapon attached. The player was free to let their imaginations run wild. It was all about changing the track, changing the car, changing the way you play.
So this was still mostly a Banjo game. So that, yeah, okay. They got inspiration from Nuts and Bolts, I see. If it would have had better controls, because Nuts and Bolts had horrible controls. Cameo 2. Let's see why this was cancelled.
Hi, I'm Peter Hentz, and I was one of the concept artists on Cameo 2. Cameo 2 was a planned sequel to Cameo, Elements of Power. Set in a world of high fantasy, the project was to be a departure from the bright, innocent-looking themes we explored in the original. Cameo's world had changed, and sinister forces were
Okay,
at
so
work.
that's why.
Much like Dorothy's return to Oz in
Instead
the
of making
1985
it
film.
light and...
Cameo had grown up, and despite her bond with nature, she herself had been touched by the darkness enveloping the world. We wanted her new character design to reflect that. These images show a more mature Cameo, and her demeanor is far more threatening. In some images, she looks wraith-like, with pale skin and a monstrous shadow. This was to be a significant new transformation that she could undertake, and would see her drawing power from her inner darkness to defeat her enemies. We investigated how the character's clothing might have evolved too, using different cuts, textures, and colors. She'd wear a long cloak that would allow her to conceal herself in shadows. From there, she could sneak up on unsuspecting victims and ambush them. We also mixed in original costume features with new designs. For example, Cameo still wears her bone
So you can
armor
really
and
tell
jewelry.
the development team at Rare really
This was another aim for
grew
the
up
art
and
team in its
everybody
character
changed
design.
to more of a
That had taken
darker
old elements
adult
and mixing them
theme.
with new concepts. The creatures, while still recognizable, are now more ferocious. We created several versions of Chilla, more aggressive looking, with ice spines protruding from his back and great claws curving from his hands, ready to shred his enemies. Atomite was also back. We tried a few different ideas for the projectile launching shell on his back. One was quite natural, another was mystical with floating pieces of geometry. Another took cues from H.R. Geiger's Alien. The creatures that fought alongside Cameo held the same screen presence, and because of this, we had to up the ante with our enemies. Taking well-known characters and turning them on their heads was an aim of ours in Cameo 2.
So that's
what
why
you
it
thought about
canceled.
someone might not be the case anymore.
Because when you go
Unlike our role
completely
in the
changing
first game,
everything,
the Mystic has become dark,
it
twisted,
doesn't feel
and
like
evil.
the original game.
She's one of the main antagonists and leads a race of serpent creatures called the Sargothans.
Okay,
This
so
warrior
now
race
you're
posed
just
a huge
copying,
threat to Cameo's world.
Dang it.
Strong,
What's it
fast,
called?
and fierce, each Sargothan was like a team of fighters
Something
unto
darkness,
itself.
right?
Formidable, especially when fully armored. The trolls would also be back, except now they were driven by technological advancement, much like Saruman's drive for industry in Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. We continued the storyline for the Whatnot book, where it had been stolen and its power turned to evil uses. Ortho, the entity that lived inside it, had been separated, and so we created versions of him with the characteristics of the book still fused in his design. His skin a papery texture, pages and text scrawled across his face and body. Quite a departure from the character you first met. All the work here shows the strong potential the project had. Although Cameo 2 didn't get the go-ahead, the concept team is still proud of what we managed to achieve in the time frame.
Alright, yeah. I don't know. It's not really the rare, charmy eyeballs. Like, that is what Rare is. More charming and not really dark. The darkest thing you guys made was, I just see it. Killer Instinct.
Hi, I'm Chris Ilcock, part of the Black Widow team. This ambitious prototype allowed players to take control of a giant mechanical spider in the middle of an alien invasion. The Black Widow could leap or climb onto almost any surface, allowing players to fend off the aliens while the scenery shattered and broke realistically around them. Everyday construction tools like blasting caps and rivet guns could be transformed into weapons to use against the aliens. In fact, you could even launch chunks of scenery, riveting them to buildings to create impromptu shields and platforms. Everyone really enjoyed leaping around the city, and the Black Widow itself found a new lease of life in another prototype. In Cameo 2, it would have become one of Cameo's most feared elemental warriors.
Yeah, so you have all the basic stuff, but sorry, I didn't mean to click anything. But yeah, it's whenever it comes to the destruction of the world, and yeah, that's the hard stuff right there. You can break the mess, but texturing and all that. Believe me, I tried a big project like this. Oh, I want destructible buildings. How hard could that be? Spend the next 4 months working on one house and going, oh, this is gonna be a thing. Then this kind of becomes, crap, what's it called? Earth Defense Force, right?
Hi, I'm Ross, and I was a designer on Tailwind. The game's protagonist was the owner of a small courier company in a world where transport was entirely aircraft-centric. As a player progressed through the game, they would have contracts to fulfill. These contracts were dictated by the aircraft the player had available, and new aircraft we purchased using money earned from fulfilling contracts. Our playable prototype was designed to prove that we could come up with a control scheme that was forgiving enough for a novice player to control a vehicle that could move in 3 dimensions. And here, for your enjoyment, is a video of our prototype.
Now this sounds like something that, yeah, would have been... Yeah, this is more rare, like, okay. Kind of gives me that Snoopy Red Baron vibe a little bit. Oh, that would have been cool. No, I just am scared that the flight controls sucked, like in Nuts and Bolts. It's hard to make a good flying simulation controls and not being like not being weird, like turning on a dime in the air and everything. So I get it. Alright, top secret tunes. Now these I'm kinda gonna skip through. Oh my god. That's a lot. So yeah, I do not care about music. And it would probably 18 times 3. Yeah, it would take an hour to listen to all this, so no thank you. I'm just gonna start them, and next. Cause yeah, that's all they are. Just little sound clips. Dream. So this is all banjo music. Yep, that makes sense. Saberman. Wonder if they were... Well, it would be on here if they were gonna make a Saberman game, right? And then have Saberwolf from Killer Instinct. Oh, that would have been funny. 12 Tails. What is 12 Tails? That's not Cameo, is it? Oh, Conquer's Bad Fur Day. That makes sense. Tailwind. Yep, that's what we heard. Be like stormy nights. And that would be summer, springtime. Jetpack refilled. Trash. 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 The entire game is trash. I understand what they were going for, but trash. Now we'll see if I missed one. Killer Instinct 2. Please, give me the achievements. Oh yeah. And that was the final one. Yes. Wowza. God. 1 year. 1 full year. Let's see if I can look. When did I officially start it? The first day. I probably would have started with the Battletoads. Let's see if I can look it up real quick. And I'm going to be posting this on Twitter, because hell yeah. Alright. Check out. I did not start with... Let's go completed games. And now we go down the list. Take your guess. Take your guess. I actually... November, August. So I started the 360 games in August. And it would be for here. Yep, August. Roll down a little bit farther. I didn't pass it, did I? Nope, here it is. Alright. And May. May. That's the lunar Jetman and everything. May. And that's everything, yes. So, really, took about 7 months then. Because I don't write down specific day, I just write down month. So, May of 2021 to December 2021. 100% rare replay. Great games, horrible achievements, great system, good fun, hard bosses. I'm glad it's over. That's kind of where I am. But yeah, thanks for everybody that has tuned in to the streams over the course of the year. And I'm gonna chill out with the 100%ing stuff now. And 2022, my goal is just play a bunch of games. Like, complete them, hopefully. And not really focus on the 100%. Because Rare Replay would be my 312th game completed since the start of 2020. So I'm hoping to complete 300 games, double what I have now, and just completing them, such as beating the story, and that's it. If I want to do 100%, I can do them off stream, but just kind of stream a little bit more and have more fun and not be so pressured. Take a year off of this 100% stress. Wow. You know, when I started, I did not think I would be able to do this. But about halfway, and after 100%ing the Battletoads, I was really sure I could. And I did! Yes. Alright. Well, I'm out of here for the day. I'm going to celebrate by playing some Halo Infinite. I'd like to move on to some newer games now. And chill out. Alright. Well, that's the end of the stream. Peace out, and thanks for watching.